Howdy, y'all. You're tuning into Go Howdy, the Southern Sports Talk podcast with Jerry.
Get rid of Brian Kelly. He's not a good fit at LSU. This is exactly what we expected. Fools.
Cody.
He's efficiently good at not getting first downs.
And Kyle.
It was like any minute somebody was just going to rip the mask off and their Jimbo was going to pop out like, haha, here I am. SEC spectators, Go Howdy family, and all of our viewers watching us live on YouTube this morning. Thanks for joining us. We are back. Week 14, rivalry week. And what a rivalry week it was. Lots of fists being thrown, pepper spray being involved at some point. It was just a wild Saturday in college football. But guys, if y'all don't mind, go ahead and address something in the room. So if y'all will kindly give me a few minutes here, we need to talk about officiating just in the SEC around college football. So looked up a stat pre-show. The SEC pulled in $852.5 million as a conference last season. So we made almost $900 million in revenue. Why do we not have full-time officials? We have our own officiating crews, right? I understand each conference has its own crews. Why do we not have guys that this is their only job? Because these guys get to make some of these egregious calls and go back to their 9-to-5 job on a Monday morning and do not have to answer for anything that they did on Saturday. We need to hire people that this is their only job. You officiate college football. And then during the week, in the off season, you go into a room and you have to sit down and review the film. And somebody needs to be the head of the officials and talk about all these calls that we get wrong. And I would even go as far as to say there needs to be a show like the Premier League does, where the head of officials has to get up there and answer for all these calls that go, either way. Because, we got our rules officials on each crew, and they jump on there, and sometimes they say, well, that should have been this, but it wasn't. And then the broadcast booth is like, well, it should have been this, and it wasn't. And then the on-the-field call is something completely different from what the rules official was just talking about. I need to have some kind of audio. It shows me what they're talking about when this goes on. It'll probably never happen. It's wishful thinking. But some of these calls in the Texas game last night, now I'm going to stand up first and say it was not the difference in the game. We got whipped. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Got absolutely smacked. However, this pylon rule, where apparently dive out of bounds and you don't even have to put the ball over the pylon, just kick it with your pinky toe, we need to address that. Secondly, you have to survive the ground. And I'm sorry, the receiver didn't survive a ground in the end zone. The ball got knocked out as he was going to the ground. So there's an official standing right there looking at it in the back corner of the end zone, and he says no catch, but replay overturns it. And then lastly, textbook target, and we're just going to be like, nah, not targeting. Don't worry about it. And then one more before I turn it over to you two guys. We had an illegal substitution called on Texas A&M on a strip sack. They got the ball back, but it would have been fourth down, where there's clear evidence of Texas running a player onto the field, and the official standing over the ball has his back to A&M sideline, and the head referee is looking towards the Texas sideline, and A&M is running a player onto the field. And he's actively motioning for somebody to substitute. Now, you guys know how they do it, right? They do the slow substitution where they just kind of trot onto the field because they're trying to, get the play clock to run down. The official never looked at the A&M, sets it to play and runs off. And now the A&M guy is trying to get back off to the sideline, and we get called for illegal substitution. What are we doing?
I think the first thing about your point is the pylon rule. Is that a rule? Like it's in the NCAA rule book? Like there's nothing the refs can do about it. Then they have to call what they got to call.
So it's funny you bring that up. We do have Kyle and I are in a separate group for a college pick'em group. And that was a talking point for a good 30 minutes. A lot of jokes were said, a lot of people questioning their intelligence with it. But according to the rules, it says a player can go airborne outside of the goal line, carry the ball outside the pylon, land out of bounds, and still be awarded a touchdown if the player had touched the pylon with a foot or hand in the process. It is not a touchdown if the pylon is not touched. So technically that is a rule.
I could understand that if they had the ball cross the plane. Like if that ball makes it into the sacred rectangle, then there's no argument for me on that. But if what I'm hearing is correct, they don't have to do that. They just have to simply touch it.
So the argument with it, or at least the play that created this argument, I believe it was a Manning run. It was one of the Texas players. It looked like that they went over the pylon, and that his offhand, the one that did not carry the ball, hit the pylon, and that's what allowed the touchdown to score. So it was still breaking the plane. It was just by the smallest margin possible.
I don't understand why guys are trying to dive and stick the ball over the pylon when the rule is, well, you can just, jump to the side. You don't have to touch it. Ball doesn't even have to go over the pylon. You can just do whatever you want. So, but real quick, just to prove my point, is the clip from the illegal substitution. Here comes obvious substitution.
Can you expand it? I'm actually glad you brought this up because I watched the replay of this after the fact.
Looking, holding play up. Oh, never mind. Go ahead. And now my guy's got to run off the field. And we get called for a legal substitution.
So,
give me a break. Give me a break.
So I'm sure the SEC officiating will bring this up this week, because at least they do somewhat of what you're asking about, is about like some transparency. I believe the problem was you had one player run on, but there wasn't a reciprocating run off. That player that was running off in a sprint was the original player that ran on the field. So if there was I'm changing myself, and the other person acknowledges it and is just kind of like tag teaming out, then I think y'all will be okay. But the fact that there was not an acknowledgement of anything, then that is basically 12 men on the field.
Yep. To the line, get people to go. He's on. Yeah, he's trying to get the guy's attention that he's trying to sub out, but he's trying to get lined up for the next play. So, yeah, I mean, I can understand what you're saying. It was the same guy running off and on, but he's trying to get somebody's attention to get off the field. And
I think what Jerry's kind of saying is, like, it didn't look like the refs had called the substitution. Like, because, you get them with the hand over the ball and everything, like, hey, you guys just did a sub. We have to let defense complete the sub too. Since they didn't get that.
They did do that. They did do that.
Oh, they did do that?
Yeah, the ref was over the ball. They were pausing it. It looked like the egregious part of it on A&M's part is typically any time that there is a substitution, you have to have one on, one off. There wasn't that one on, one off. It looked like that everyone was focused, ready to do it.
Oh, so they missed their window? Is that what they're trying to say?
Basically, yeah. Like, they still would have had the window, but the ref was. And that's what I'm thinking. The refs saw the fact that there was no player returning it, so then there was no, like, it was more of a, I think I need to be on this play, and just got on the field when there were 12 men on the field, rather than there being actual substitution.
Yeah, maybe. See, this is kind of weird, Kyle. These are like complaints that like you don't normally see from refs. You usually see like play call, not rule violation or rule stipulation complaints. It is an interesting thing. But, Jerry, there's an interesting article from the Rivalry, actually, about this, about how to become an NCAA referee. And
yeah.
I didn't know that you actually, yes, you have to start as a high school referee.
Yeah, no, there's quite a bit with it. You have to essentially work your way up and prove yourself that you can. And Kyle, to support your argument with it, excuse me, though I did send you a Twitter link of an egregious, like, unsportsmanlike conduct penalty where the defender was going full sprint, about to tackle the Texas receiver. He doesn't catch the ball, but it was like a little graze, nothing terrible, nothing like he was going to take his head off. but he gets called for the unsportsmanlike conduct because like the helmet graze or whatever. That I absolutely agree. They need to be held accountable for it. And I do think it's not too ridiculous to think that we can eventually get to what the Premier League does and have every penalty reviewed, because they're doing so much bang bang calling on the field that it's not ridiculous to think that there couldn't be a head official in the box or at the studio or whatever and be like, hey, that penalty that you threw is not the case. That needs to be picked up. And if they even have it just for the TV listeners, that's fine and dandy. But I don't think that is too ridiculous to ask for.
Well, soccer and rugby both do that. Like if there's a review from the booth, you can hear what the ref on the field and the ref in the booth are talking about. And the ref in the booth is the one who gets to make the call. And he even tells them, he's like, all right, you go ahead and award the score. Go ahead and award possession to them or whatever it is. But you hear his logic and his like, hey, if you look at him right there, you can see him. He's not quite, nope, he's dropping that ball. That ball's dropped. And then you're like, oh, yeah, I see it. Okay, well, I'll award possession the other way. Like, you'll hear the dialogue.
Reviews, though. It should also be for every single penalty. Like, when any time
I don't know how often they're reviewing.
Say what?
I don't know how often those refs in the booth for soccer and rugby are reviewing. I don't know if it's just for scores or out of bounds or what it is.
But that's the thing, like,
I mean, the assistant referee is constantly in communication the entire game with the head referee in his headset, like the little earpiece they wear. There's a constant communication back and forth, so it can be done. And the other point is that the XFL was doing this, during season when there was replays or questionable calls, you could hear on the broadcast the live back and forth between the referees. So it can be done. It should be done. I think we all need it, but it's got to start at the NFL most likely, and then it'll down to college, I'm sure. So, but to review the game before we move on to anything else, Texas A&M got absolutely whipped. Our only touchdown came on a pick six. The defense did just enough to keep them in the game. Offensively, there probably has to be some real conversations this offseason between Mike Elko and Colin Klein, because our offense, since Marcel Reed took over, we're 0-3 in conference games. Since the South Carolina game, scored 52-0 in our last three conference games before we ever put a point on the board. That's an issue. We got to fix that. Elko stood up. He took it on the chin, said, hey, it's on us, which I expect him to. Obviously, you're not going to throw the players under the bus. I do think it's a scheme issue. I don't think it was so much an execution issue, especially offensively, because we just had nothing going. Our first drive looked great. The scripted drive, of course, what they all do, looked great. But other than that, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, probably 6 in the game. We kept trying to run it up the middle. And we also kept trying to pull guards on a 4th and 1. I can't understand that. Why do we want 330 pounds moving east and west instead of going north? I mean, just get behind him and run straight.
Yeah, giving up the point of attack when they know run's coming is kind of interesting decision.
Not in that fire Klein just yet, but Jerry, I think we're kind of in that point where LSU was last year defensively, where it was just like, didn't look good this year, so there needs to be some serious conversations this offseason where it's
like where is the line where it's acceptable and unacceptable. I mean, it was basically 50-50. So from what I watched, because all of our games were on at the same time, and there's not a TV big enough to allow 3 55-inch games going on unless you have the TV space to do so. I'm looking at my wife and trying to make that happen, by the way. But it looked like it was 50% scheme after the fact that it was 50% lack of execution. Because you could watch Marcel Reed try to throw the ball down the field. He didn't look good doing it. Like he made some very questionable passes, especially the one that caused the interception down the boundary. That was not a good pass to do. You're scrambling, just live another day, just try to get the first down on your feet. You don't need to airmail that 30 yards down the field and try to force that kind of situation. But I kind of have to support Colin Klein with it. When you see your quarterback is not in a rhythm, especially Reed, who is young and not the best passer. I know that we've said that on this before. He's not the greatest passer. He can get there, but if the passing game isn't working for him, you're basically one-dimensional, and the only thing that you can do is run the ball. So I can see where the scheme could be a factor with it, especially on that 4th and goal on the 2-yard line, which everyone can say what they want. The hindsight is 2020. I think going for it was the right idea. The play calling wasn't the best idea. And it makes me wonder how much was the RPO kind of stuff, the quarterback option, how much of that was Reed thinking that he can do it, or how much it was like the coach saying, hey, this is going to be a quarterback option, but you're going to hand it off, That's what I'm curious about.
I think a team as good as Texas A&M, though, it's got to be off-season preparation, you would think. And you had to kind of give them a little bit of credit here. I say credit, not really, but they had to switch quarterbacks in the middle of the season. They went from a completely different scheme. They thought Wegman was going to help them run this pro style, maybe similar to Texas spread type approach. And then like, oh, no, now we're down to the option RPO with Marcel Reed. Also, I think trying to install that through the seasons probably just got above them. But I think Texas A&M, with as much talent as they have, if you just invest in strength and conditioning, make sure these position groups are focusing on these little things, and then make sure your quarterback's coach is ready to get your quarterback on the same page with the scheme you're installing, instead of having to switch schemes in the middle of the year and switch quarterbacks in the middle of the year, you probably have some pretty good momentum going into next season. I wouldn't be too worried about this.
Games, and we lost Le'Veon Moss, and it just seemed like there was a refusal to change on our behalf, because and that's where I'm getting at with Colin Klein, of like, we had to have some serious conversations. It's not like Le'Veon Moss was in the Heisman running, so him going out shouldn't have had that much of an effect. It did, obviously, but again, we went for game on 4th, got stuffed. Go for it late in the game on 4th when we have to get stuffed again. If we just run a different play there, as a diehard Aggie fan, I can at least go, well, we tried to make an adjustment. We tried something different. I can at least applaud you for that. But we didn't. We tried the same pull and pin and go right up the middle, some kind of trap play. And especially on the goal line, I mean, we just got whipped. Number 45 from Texas, I don't know who he is, the nose tackle, but he absolutely whipped us all night long. We couldn't do anything to block. I watched him throw Trey Zune, who's 6'7", 335, to the ground with just a push of the hand. So it was just not what you were wanting for. And I think Elko said it perfectly after the game. Somebody asked him, is this, are you happy that the rivalry's back? Was this a good, welcome back into it? And he said, I'm happy that it's back, but this was not a great start for Aggie fans. And I agree. I mean, hey, for as many tweets as I saw thrown out of the game after you paid over $1,000 for a ticket, what are we doing? What are we doing?
So many fans ejected for public intoxication. That was insane. Yeah. I think the best one had to have been the guy riding the Longhorn with his dog around campus.
Funny. So the two guys,
it's probably the most
two guys who dressed up as construction workers with their fake construction passes, tried to sneak in the game. That's a criminal trespass, buddy, which I'm pretty sure is a felony. So great job.
And there's not even construction going on Kyle Field at the moment. Like, that was
they could have tried something else, like maybe hold a camera in the vest, and now you look like your news crew or press. Now they're going to ask for your press pass, but
at least that's a more believable.
Yeah,
like, I left mine's with my manager up in the press box or something. We need to change this conversation because we're giving people ideas to commit criminal trespass felonies. So we probably need to do that.
Speaking of trespass felonies, I guess the next thing we can talk about for Florida State is flag planting. That's where we'll start, because this was a big week for flag planting. And, of course, Florida, big-time rivalry, plants the flag. Else. And the brawls. I love the brawls. And before we get into Florida, because Florida actually kind of handled business. They looked bad doing it, but they kind of did handle business against Florida State. Ohio State's is another level. First of all, Ohio State not beating Michigan since Ryan Day has taken over, that's wild. That team is wildly better than whatever Michigan put out there today. And they deserve to plant that flag. And now we got stories of pepper spray coming out.
That's been confirmed. The police had to get involved, use pepper spray. There's videos of Michigan players trying to get the pepper spray out of their eyes. I mean, it's warranted, and the flag planting stuff is on the same tier as fans rushing the field, in my opinion. You just like it's good to have a good win against a rival, against someone that is ranked higher than you, like with you being the underdog. I am all for it. Give me the chaos. Love it. But let's do better than that, y'all. Like how give
Love to
Texas a
see
little
the
credit.
passion though. Like
Oh
it's
no,
these
I'm all
programs
for it too.
genuinely hate each other despite being like, hey man, because the NFL, it's like you see them do the jersey exchanges and you're like, yeah, that's good for you guys. You're professionals, it's whatever.
Right.
Office etiquette at the end of the game. In college, it's like, no, sir, this is not fun. Being here is a job to kill you. That is what I want to do.
But like, why not if you're like Mississippi or I'm sorry, Alabama? If you're playing the game at Auburn, why don't the fans or the players go roll Toomer's Corner or go to
Because they
the?
poisoned the tree last time they let them do that, Jerry.
Well, that's a crazy Harvey Updike, but that's what I'm saying though. Like, there's good ways to smack it back in your rivals without being like vandalism or causing a fight like that. Like, I doubt people get upset about Toomer's Corner being rolled rather than planting a flag.
Ooh,
in the
I don't
field.
know. See, Jerry, I know a lot of your rivalries don't have like symbology attached to them. Like Florida,
Really
Florida
don't.
State actually has like the hand gestures. Florida State has their chop, we have our chomp. So it's like these little like rituals that you add to the rivalry matter a lot. And when you have a physical place that's a part of the rivalry, that's untouchable. No Alabama. If Alabama fans are caught looking at it, there has to be a problem. And it's like, oh yeah, I'll go to jail today. If I see anyone walk past it a little too brisk, I'll fight somebody over that tree if I'm an Auburn fan. And that animosity is what makes SEC so great. Like we talked about yesterday, Alabama, Iron Bowl, but this one specifically, Florida, Florida State. Florida had some miscues. There's that interception in the end zone where the receivers look at each other and they're like, "Did you know we were throwing the ball?" Like they looked surprised that the ball was there when they turned around. So that back shoulder fade definitely did not work. But other than that,
I was watching SEC Now this morning, trying to get prepared for this. They said that, and this was Chris Doring that was breaking it down. The I think the Z receiver, the one that's all the way at the boundary, he's supposed to do a little hook to keep that defender close, and then the slot receiver was the one that was doing the fade,
catch the anticipated route.
Yes. Okay. And so it was wide receiver miscommunication. And that's why you had 3 defenders around 2 receivers. So that's what happened there. But do we really have, there's not much to talk about. This was just Florida State looking bad all season. And Lagway actually looking, or not say actually looking, Florida ending the season on a great note. 7-5, gentlemen. That's insane.
Yeah. It's for the second, for some people rated the first hardest, for most people rated top 3 hardest schedule in the country. Coming in, nabbing wins against ranked teams when you were down with a quarterback switch, shows a lot of maybe offseason preparation for either they thought that was going to happen or they did some good conditioning. Last thing I'll say, Kyle, just to give you a little bit of a high school nugget. Of course, Montrell Johnson Jr. has a huge run. He's from here in Louisiana. From De La Salle High School. Escaped the bayou, made it to the swamp, and finished capping off his senior year with a great run there.
What I think was shocking, probably the most shocking statistic on this game, though, 8 fumbles for Florida State. 5 of them were lost. That's insane.
That's strength and conditioning. Like that's mental at that point. Like you're just like we're a fumbling team, so I fumbled too.
you cause a fumble. You cause a fumble. Everyone causes a fumble.
Read it right on the bottom of the screen yesterday. I think it was actually during the Florida State game, which was crazy to me. But I saw that Florida State hired Gus Malzahn to be the next offensive coordinator.
Yes, he's leaving Central Florida to be the offensive coordinator at Florida State.
A bit too much. That you had Chip Kelly go be the offensive coordinator at OSU. Right, left his head coaching job. Now you got Gus Malzahn, his head coaching job to go be an offensive coordinator. You had another head coach that left college to go back to the NFL. I mean, obviously Harbaugh did, but I'm talking about somebody else as well that was like, I'm
Yeah.
tired of dealing with all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Harbaugh's dream is to be in
Right.
the
But
NFL.
that just shows you that, I mean, that job stops. You're always recruiting new players, you're recruiting your team, and I think
No.
they're just getting sick of it.
The new contract negotiations you have to go through, like you never had that before. It was more like, okay, I can do the under the table deals. I'm not gonna say here anyone who pretends like they weren't doing that to begin with, but now it has to be on paper. Now it's harder because you have to document it. It's like, oh my gosh. And then yeah, whereas the boosters beforehand be like, coach, we'll take care of it. Just tell him we'll handle it. Now it's like, oh, how much money does he want?
So happy. I don't think any of us had the 7-5 on the bingo card when we looked at the roster and not the roster so much, but the schedule to start the year. So Florida obviously had a great year, in my opinion, had a great year. We'll see what happens in the offseason. Probably going to be a really dangerous team next year for Florida. But Jerry, let's touch on your guys. You're the only one we haven't talked about just yet. So LSU took care of Oklahoma. I'll admit I didn't get to watch a whole lot of it. I did see your update halfway through the game that Nuss was out and that you had to go to the backup. So give me your true scouting report on how the backup looked.
Whew. So LSU, and I told myself I was going to do the research. I completely forgot. But LSU's defense has impressed myself as well as some of my friends that are in the Baton Rouge area, how they have improved ever since the A&M game. Yes, Alabama was still a hiccup, but the fact that they were improving to stop the run was there. It was evident from the first play against Oklahoma that they were prepared for Jackson Arnold, and they weren't going to have a repeat of what Arnold did against Alabama. But you're right. Nussmeier got hurt at the very top of the second quarter. It was looking like a very long, very painful game to watch. He even it was so bad that he had to go back to the locker room. He did not have his helmet or shoulder pads on, and he just ran to the locker room. We didn't see him until about the 2-minute warning of the second quarter. And AJ Swan, ooh, I am so thankful that Nussmeier was able to come back because AJ Swan could not hit the broadside of a barn with his passes.
Speaking of comebacks, Chris Hilton Jr.
I know,
redemption game, huh?
Very, very big. I didn't have that happening either. Chris Hilton catching 2 touchdowns, but AJ Swan was not a good backup. I mean, yes, he has experience coming from Vanderbilt, but he was thrown into it. And kudos to the special teams and the defense for LSU, keeping LSU in the game so that it wasn't that bad of a situation if and when Nussmeier came back. But Caden Durham had a day. The passing game had a day. Jackson Arnold really couldn't do much. They did just enough to get first downs and keep it interesting for a little bit. But the main thing that stuck out to me, like LSU has done quite a few times this season, 0 points in the second half for Oklahoma. Like the second half adjustments that the defensive coordinator, Blake Baker at LSU, can do has really impressed me. And I believe this is the 4th game this season where we see the opponents not scoring a single point in the second half. So love what I'm seeing here. I'm just praying because there's a lot of rumors that we have quite a few players returning this season or coming from this season to next season. And Harold Perkins is one of those names that keeps getting dropped that he'll return.
I wonder if that one's true because for him, he's obviously the biggest NFL talent you guys have. At least celebrity status wise.
I mean, Will Campbell will be drafted higher than Perkins for sure, but
I don't think he would have if he had stayed healthy. But like the problem is he can't stay healthy. No, I'm talking about
Harold Perkins.
Harold Perkins, yeah.
Yeah.
Edge rushers definitely get a lot of draft attention, and of course, left tackles get that attention for the same reason. But I don't know. Do you think it's those are 2 names that come to mind for me, of course, Nussmeier and Perkins. Do you think that they both come back?
Nussmeier, yes. Perkins is still a toss-up. Campbell is gone. I mean, he's a top 5 draft pick. I think the big question for the offensive line is, can we get Emery back, the right tackle for LSU? If we get him back, I think that is a huge anchor point that will continue this offensive line grow that we need. But I see Anderson coming back. I see Perkins coming back. I see Nussmeier coming back. I think that would be great.
No, I think he probably would have liked to have been healthy this year, obviously, but more of a display out to get drafted higher. So again, I think this is where the NIL money when it comes to these college players. If they can work a deal with Harold Perkins to say, hey man, look, I know you got hurt last year. Here's what we can do on our end to compensate you if you'll decide to stay with us and give us one more year and be able to really build your resume and see if we can't get you from a first round pick to a top 5 pick kind of thing. So I think that's where the NIL money plays out in these kind of situations. I would like to see Harold Perkins back for another year. I mean, just look at what a guy like Anthony Hill did, for Texas this year. And I think him and Perkins were on that same level when they came out of high school. Now, the real frustrating part about that as an Aggie fan is that I had both of them. I had them both. And then they left.
He did essentially, right.
But, hey, it is what it is. Decisions for themselves, and I'm not going to disrespect either one of those young guys for making the decisions they thought was best for them. I hope them, I hope the best for both of them. Obviously, Anthony Hill had a huge impact in the game last night, but I think Harold Perkins comes back for one more year. I think we would all like to see that, just so we can truly see his potential unlocked in the new defense under Baker. Yeah. What?
Yeah, if I'm him, I'm going to the NFL. But I can see why there might be a case to come back.
I don't get it either.
Just now, my health seems like a timeline now. So why spend another year of it without trying my luck in the draft?
Right.
Ball career's done. I mean, knock on wood. Obviously, I hope it doesn't happen, but there is that chance. So I get both sides of the coin.
So you can do it as LSU Tiger, you can do it as a Brown,
Sure.
one or the other.
You're not wrong. The one player I do think is going to be gone and deserves a little bit of a nod is Braden Swinson, number 4 for LSU. There was the one interception that Kip Lewis, number 10 for Oklahoma, they were trying to do a trick play, and it was supposed to be a pass back to the quarterback. And you'll see the replay from the press box. Braden Swinson stayed there with the quarterback. He knew exactly what was happening and was on that quarterback like glue. Number 10 panicked and threw it down the field and just airmailed it to an LSU defender. So I think Braden Swinson made himself quite a bit of money this season as well.
Just real quickly, I don't even know if we really need to spend more than 30 seconds. I'm just going to throw these scores out there. 2 games as expected that we all picked correctly. Ole Miss did struggle with Mississippi State for a little bit, but ends up closing them out. Mr. Bentley, the running back, goes for 136 and 1 touchdown. Probably could have used more of him in the Florida game, but it is what it is. So they took care of Mississippi State. They win the Egg Bowl. Jackson Dart sets the record for most passing yards as an Ole Miss quarterback. Something like that.
I think, in career, I think for a career, maybe. I don't remember if it was, I think it's either career or season. It's one of them.
Career. Yeah, that sounds right. And then our other, as expected, was Louisville absolutely smacking around Kentucky, 41-14 in the Governor's Cup. So, I don't think either one of us watched the Louisville game for sure. We watched a little bit.
I watched.
Yeah.
Not even a second of it.
I watched a little bit of it. What's more concerning is that Mark Stoops is having to make official statements after the game, and it looks like that his seat surprisingly is getting pretty dang hot.
Much more exciting than the as expected, and that was the 8 overtime game on Friday night between Georgia Tech and Georgia. The clean, old-fashioned hate, as they called it. It was a game.
So, can we?
There was nothing clean about it.
Let's give Haynes King his due. Right, so he needs to be praised for everything. And actually, I think the play before the play they lose in the 8th overtime or whatever is a correct play. You put it in Haynes King's hands. You've rode him this far, you've gotten this far. You're not supposed to be here. Try to win with the guy who got you here. It just didn't work. It is what it is. Second thing I want to say is the conversation we had off podcast, I want to bring it up just a little bit. This was a good game. Georgia should have won by a little bit more. I don't think there's much more to say about it. They're going to the playoffs. Okay, good job, Georgia. This new overtime rule. Okay. I like that it's the new overtime rule because I think college football's overtime is the worst done overtime in all of sports. And what I mean by that is, okay, football is a game of the whole field. And every other sport makes you play the whole court, makes you play the whole field. And it's like, okay, if we're a fast-paced full court team, we can still do that in overtime. Imagine if they said, well, no, we're only going to use half the court now. Everybody just plays pick up 21 until somebody wins. Well, you just took that team's advantage away. And it's the same thing in the NFL. They're like, hey, we're a deep shot team. If we're the Saints, we do a little bit of inside run, we do verts back in the Drew Brees days, right? So what you take away their biggest advantage with their downfield passing, and you do the same thing here. There's no open field to work with. You condense the game and you make it a different sport. I don't think that's right. You should make them play the whole field like the NFL does. Making it a condensed back and forth shootout, I think it's too easy for the worst team, and it just changed. To me, it's a different game. We're playing a different sport at that point. We've just created like backyard football 2.0, and that's how you win an NCAA game now.
I want the old. Give me the 7 overtime rules. That's the best overtime in football. Cody.
No, NFL rules better. Top hands down. There's no better in football rules than NFL.
You can end in a tie. If you
doesn't
can end
matter.
a game in a tie, it
doesn't matter because you're not winning a football game anymore.
Canada. We are not in Canada. This is American football.
Jerry,
you do not end in
you
ties.
Cannot,
it's a win or a loss. Someone needs to be a winner and someone needs to be the loser. Someone needs to be a sore loser.
Then they can be an overtime winner because they didn't win the football game. They won new game. Here's new game we made, guys. Here, we're done playing chess. Now let's go play Jenga. You're the chess champion because you won a game of Jenga. Like, that doesn't make any sense. How do you take half of the field out?
Going to the half field or the 50-yard line and playing.
You're right. They take out even more than half the field. You play on 25% of the field.
No, but you're saying that they play completely different sports. Like, okay, y'all
been
playing football for the last 60 minutes.
How do you run a verts concept from 25 yards out? How do you do that? How is your spread run attack any valuable if they know you can't do anything? Like, we can condense because there's nowhere to go.
Well, then they got to learn how to do more than just the deep
ball.
Yeah,
you have to learn to play a different game. You don't have to learn to play football.
It's the same game.
No.
It's the same 11 players against 11 players on the same field.
Jerry,
yes.
It's factually not. You're starting without. Your safeties have an easier job. Football. They don't have the back of the field behind them.
They have always had the back of the field behind them, Cody.
Jerry,
you're telling
me there's no difference between starting. Jerry, you're telling me there's no difference between starting on your own 20 and your opponent's 20. There's no difference. The game plan doesn't change at all at that point.
There is no difference other than the fact.
Okay, I understand where you stand as a football analyst now. I get it.
The same
I get
thing.
it.
The only thing that would change
is how
much time is on the clock. If you are on your 20-yard line with 2 minutes left compared to 15 minutes left in the quarter,
you're telling me you use the same play sheet from the 20 of your. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
You still use the same plays. I
need people's thoughts on that.
You have the same game.
No, you
don't. You know what you don't have
in
the NFL?
Jerry, they specifically have 2nd and 7 play call sheets from the 50. They have 2nd and 7 from the 20, 2nd and 7 from the 15. They have these play calls
like to that side of the play.
Yeah, so you
like, these are our plays that we use.
So that's my argument.
Situations.
That's my argument is that they have to throw out half their playbook, and now if they're a good team in the back end, they're like, well, it doesn't matter anymore. It's a test of our linebackers in front and our cornerbacks man-to-man abilities.
I will end my debate with this statement. If a team doesn't have something prepared or planned or schemed or written up or thought of when you are within the 25-yard line of your opponent's end of the field, you deserve to lose.
You deserve to lose if your defense isn't good enough to stop a team on the first attempt, like the NFL.
You deserve to lose if your team does not have the ability to stop them for the first 60 minutes.
Okay, then just we're talking about overtime, Jerry. That means neither team did that.
But what you're saying is basically the same thing. Like, your defense isn't going to be good
No.
enough to stop them in overtime. You have a full 60 minutes to try to stop them on defense. You had a full 60 minutes to try to score something. Yes.
No, then in a tie, then neither team deserves to win.
Someone needs to lose.
No, you
And
just
that's the
said
great
if you
thing.
you had every opportunity to win, just end it in a tie.
Yeah, and then you have to prove yourself because
Jerry,
in college
Jerry,
football,
you have to talk
we
yourself
do
out of
not
this
have
corner
ties.
right now. You just
You're
said
not
to
talking out
both
of it.
teams.
I'm
You
on
did.
top of
You
the
just said
bloody
that.
hill right now. Kyle, let's move on.
Enjoyable. And just to sit here.
But offensive coordinators, make sure you take note. The magnificent Jerry says you don't need different play call sheets from the 20, your own 20 and your opponent's 20.
100% correct.
Because I'm not opening that can of worms. Can we take away?
He says,
Can we take away the
opening can of
timeout?
worms.
I mean, that was just ridiculous.
Yes.
And I thought it was great
Ugh.
that Georgia Tech finally caught on to what Kirby was doing, which is like, we're going to run the formation out, we're going to call timeout, and then we're going to have to go a different play. So he calls his timeout, right? And then they run out there in a formation and then bump to another formation. And you can see Kirby, I think he even ran down and tried to call another timeout because he was like, oh God, they did something different. Oh no, I can't call timeout. What do I do? And everybody's just scrambling around and like, what do we do? I so wish Georgia Tech would have won the game on that play. I wish just as a big,
Yeah, I wish
to
too.
you, but I digress. Great game. You up all the time there with that lovely debate on overtime, which is great.
Well, there's not much to it. Now, this creates kind of that weird scenario no one wanted to see. Georgia can just run their backups out for the SEC championship game now. It's kind of a sucky situation.
Well, let's talk quick, Jerry. I know you got to try to make church this morning, so I'll turn it over to you first. Let's talk about a team that may have punched a ticket to the college football playoff after the way things started out for them this season, which was not good. Clemson went into, South Carolina goes into Death Valley and took down Clemson. And that before I turn it over to you, Shane Beamer grabs Lenore Sellers at the end of the game and says, "This is the best player in college football." Hey
man,
I get it.
By your guy.
I mean, I get it as well. He did have a good game. I mean, or I say the running game that he has is amazing. 16 carries, 166 yards. I'm not convinced that half of those were supposed to be passes that he just started scrambling to save his life, because Clemson's defense did have his number for a good bit of that game. He was just slick and was unable to go down. But you're right. I mean, South Carolina has put themselves in a very interesting situation with the fact that they could jump over some teams. Now, this is where it will get interesting and where I'll end my conversation is because Miami. Hey, baby. You looking so cute. Daddy will be right there, okay, baby? Sorry. Yes, my daughter is giving me the 1 minute warning that I have to get ready for church. Because Miami lost to Syracuse, Clemson is in the ACC championship game. So this is where a good test of how this college football playoff committee is going to do their picking is if Clemson loses to SMU, do they get where do they go? Because realistically, South Carolina and Clemson should swap places. That would mean that South Carolina is the 12th seed, but obviously Clemson has the additional game of the championship game, whereas South Carolina does not. So who gets it?
And there's another team standing in their way too that we're about to talk about. But there's a team standing in both their ways right now.
No, that interesting point. It's going to be real. We'll see what happens. I mean, obviously, Clemson still has a chance with the ACC championship to win that game and get in. They got to go down and take down SMU at that point. But there's a chance they could still make it in. Is potentially going to go down to SMU. SMU has looked really good this year. I haven't watched a lot of their games, but statistically looking at that. However, South Carolina, I think they've done enough. I mean, they had a bad start to the year, and that's what the new format was supposed to be about, right? It was supposed to be for these teams that start out bad, but they figured out throughout the year, and then they potentially build a resume.
The problem is their name and their location is not in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
was my only thought after watching the Iron Bowl yesterday and seeing the way that it turned out was that you're telling me that Alabama's about to get into the playoff.
Yeah. And they also, of course, unfortunately have the head-to-head. So if we're being logical about this, I know it sucks to sit here and think to ourselves that, yes, it's just another Alabama in the playoffs year. It is. And Ohio State looks like they're going to do the same thing. They're going to show up, look good for maybe the first round, lose this to Alabama in the second round or something. But yeah, I really hope they find a way to squeeze South Carolina in. I think you're right. I think they're the definition of what they wanted to see from progress from these teams throughout the year. And if anything, I don't know how they don't prove it with their last performance against Clemson.
Their almost embarrassing loss to Old Dominion at the start of the year, and then almost take down Alabama, go down and take down Texas A&M at home, take down Missouri at home, which I know Missouri probably wasn't the best resume builder for them, but you know.
Yeah, speaking of officiating, LSU, that LSU loss is like haunting them like crazy right now. And we're not going to sit here and harp on officiating. Of course, South Carolina could have always just scored more points, I guess. But wow, to sit here and think back to that's how the podcast started and probably how we'll end it today is around just officiating's a thing, man. And they are part-timers. They are the only ones we expect to be 100% correct on the field at all times. It's a hard day to be a football fan and look back at the way officiating's got, especially with cameras now.
So I look at the interpretation of the rule. And do we interpret it that way the same when we do the replay? Which, in my opinion, a couple calls in the A&M game that didn't go that way. Now, I know Jerry, if I just said that out loud with him still being here, he'd be like, well, technically that was a blindside block on Nussmeier. I understand. There's so many different ways to skin a cat, I guess you could say. And sometimes somebody interprets it one way, sometimes somebody interprets it another way. Obviously, we do that a lot on this podcast. That's why I think there needs to be some head official for each group that then has to stand up and answer for, no, I talked to this official, and here's what we were thinking, and here's why we called it this way. I could live with that at the end of the day, especially on the out-of-bounds catch that turned into a touchdown for Texas. The rule has always been you got to survive the ground, right? You're an NFL guy, so I can throw these examples out there. Des Bryant, there was the guy, I think his last name was James from the Steelers, who catches the ball in the end zone, breaks the plane, but it hits the ground, loses it. Now all of a sudden it's not a touchdown. That is exactly what happened in the Texas A&M game last night. He catches it in the corner. Yeah, he possessed it, but as he's going to the ground, it gets punched out.
And that's another thing, like you said, like it's all to interpretation. Who gets to determine what is possession? It's that ref, because you think that they get to go review it, but at the end of the day, the call he puts on the field matters more because that's the call they have to now argue against. It can't be like, oh, we're back at 50-50, which is, I think, maybe for some challenges it should be that way, to where it's like, okay, if it's a booth review, it's not the call on the field, it's 50-50. We're going to figure out what actually happened. If it's a coach challenging, like, okay, no, the call on the field is what you want reversed. So we have to attack the call on the field. Not, I don't know, maybe that's not a fair way to look at it. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe some of our spectators can give us a little bit of their insights of what they would do to fix booth reviews, because it was supposed to be this revolutionary thing, and we still kind of feel left behind by it. Now, have we made strides? Absolutely. Football history would be so different without booth reviews right now. And maybe for the more controversial,
issue
for sure.
With and I'll move on from it eventually in my life, but right, I just can't get past it. Is that while the rules official is on, talking to Herbie and who is that, Fowler, in the booth with Herbie, and so they're talking about it. Never one time was it brought up about surviving the ground or maintaining possession all the way through the catch. They kept harping on, was his foot in bounds? And I'm like, yeah, that's part of the process. And yes, his foot was in bounds. It was a great catch by the guy. However, the second part of that is you got to survive the ground. There's a referee standing right there. He's standing at the back of the end zone, and it happens literally right in front of him. And he watches the ball hit the turf, and he goes, yeah, incomplete. And then the interpretation was, after it was come back, the play's reversed because the runner had possession with 1 foot down. No, That's not the rule.
No, possession doesn't. Yeah, that would count if it was like a running back leaping into it, right? If he crosses the plane, then lands and fumbles, doesn't matter. He crossed the plane with it possession, but at least that's the way I interpret it.
Sideline, right? He catches the ball on the sideline, his foot's
Yeah.
in, but he hits the ground, he loses it. Well, now it's not a catch because it didn't survive the ground. So why did it change for the touchdown play? Yeah. Anyway, we could spend the next 30 minutes going on about officiating, but let's get to a couple more of the games here. Let's talk about the Tennessee Vanderbilt game. Started out really great for Vanderbilt, right? 14-0,
Ugly.
you're up, and then all of a sudden, I think we harped on it in the preview show, is that you have to find another answer other than Diego. And he finishes this game 8 for 17, 104 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Was actually not the leading rusher of this game, which is surprising for how the Vanderbilt offense has been built. But instead, Cedric Alexander had 60 yards and 1 touchdown to lead the way for that. But just, again, 213 yards total for Vanderbilt. Now, we knew the Tennessee defense was really good. We've talked about that multiple times. But this is kind of just like Colin Klein is in my argument with him right now, is that Vanderbilt had one thing working at the start of the year, and then they figured out how to stop it, and they never tried to change from it. That was still their offense, which was go through Diego.
I don't think they had the tools to change it, to be honest with you. Like, there's nothing on their roster that speaks to me as saying, like, hey, we can lean here, or there's nothing about their scheme that's like, we can confuse defenses enough with some other type of tactic. Additionally, Tennessee is finally who we thought they were. Like, this is a game where Nico goes off, Sampson goes off, their defense goes off, their offensive prowess is on display, their blocking is superior this game. Well, I say superior, they gave up 3 sacks. That's kind of surprising. But like, it was one of those things where I remember when I watched a few plays of it. I guess their run blocking is where I would give them some credit because they look aggressive. Like, this is a Tennessee team that I don't think anyone in the playoffs is excited to play because they could send it either way. If you shut down Nico, you win this game, most likely. But if you can't shut down Nico and you let him have even a pedestrian game, Dylan Sampson's going to put the finishing punches on a lot of teams that go to the playoffs. I think Tennessee has what it takes to have a deep run right now, and we were writing them off after their loss to Ole Miss. But, man, here they are just storming back.
25 carries, 178 yards. No touchdowns, but Nico led the way in that with 4 passing touchdowns and put some balls into some pretty tight windows. I got to watch a lot of that game that morning, and he looked good. He looked like who he thought he was going to be to start the year. So they're one of those teams.
Nico also pulling it a lot more on the options.
True.
You notice that? Like, whereas beforehand he was just, and they still gave it to Sampson so many times, but it used to be his RPOs or his read options were strictly, I'm just letting Sampson run this. I'm not running into that. Now he's actually made the threat of, I'll take the edge if you don't respect that. So very good I think Tennessee's hitting all the right notes at the right time.
Later in the season, which is not well for whoever they have to take on in the playoffs, especially that first round. They're kind of clicking on all cylinders right now. Going to be a gap between, last game they played and the first playoff game, obviously. So we'll see how that turns out. But Tennessee is a team that really kind of figured it out as the year went on and deserving to be in the playoff. I think that's one team that none of us could be like, yeah, I don't know if they deserve to be in. They made it there. So good for them. Arkansas, Missouri.
Sorry, I had to sneeze there.
Arkansas, Missouri. The snow game. It was not friendly weather in Missouri for this game, but
No.
It turned out to be a pretty good ball game.
I love football. I love football snow games, but this game was just ugly. Arkansas is an ugly football team.
Yeah. And for Taylor Green, I thought he did the best he could this year, and I was really impressed with how he played. He's a junior. Hopefully he'll come back for one more year. But you take a guy that's 6'6", 230, that can run like that and throw like that. He made a throw at the end of the game last night as Arkansas was coming down their last drive off his back foot about 35 yards and put it into a bucket in the corner of the end zone. And I was like, that is a NFL throw right there. I mean, he's obviously got the tools to play at the next level. I think Arkansas would really benefit from him coming back one more year, kind of getting a reset on the whole season. But did Sam Pittman do enough to keep his job this year?
I don't know either. It's a tough question. But actually, both these teams are in tough spots. Brady Cook comes back playing injured. I don't understand this from Brady Cook. He's an NFL prospect type quarterback. Maybe not your early round guy, but maybe for sure someone who's going to have some kind of pro prospects. This is the end of the season. I'm sorry, you guys are not going to the playoffs. Like you're ranked 21st in the country. There's so many other fancy names out there that everyone's looking to try to vie for those last spots. You're not competitive in that arena. Why are you risking your health playing in this game? Throwing for 50% in a snow game.
If I'm Brady Cook, which obviously I'm not, and I'm not a Division I quarterback, but if I look at that weather report, I'm like, yeah, coach, I ain't going out there. Sorry, we're not playing for anything at this point. So I mean, we're playing for pride, but I'm not going out there.
And then Luther Burden in his year, after I gave him a lot of praises at the beginning of this year, and like last year, he deserved it coming in, 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns. This year, 20 less receptions, 25 less receptions, 600 yards, half the yards, 676 yards, and 6 touchdowns. What a meltdown.
The point I can make to that is looking at his stats right now from this year to last year was that he did get involved. It seems like a little more in the rushing game this year. He did have 9 carries for 115 yards when he had 31 yards rushing last season. So maybe they tried him more as like a Swiss Army knife kind of thing. But when you're wideout number 1 for a Division I program, you can't have a 600-yard drop off year to year. It's not gonna cut it. It's not gonna cut it, and that's. Is he a senior? No, he's only a junior, so he's got one more.
I'd
decides.
leave. I just see at the combine, receivers are like, you look at Tyreek Hill and his story and all kinds of receivers who just work their way up. You have so much more latitude. They have to play 3 of you at a time, and those guys are getting hurt all the time. So getting drafted in the 5th round, 6th round, not that bad. If I were him, maybe I don't think whatever's happening in Missouri is for me. Maybe I'd transfer. Oh, we don't even talk about that as much as we should. You probably should transfer.
Unless you're a generational talent at wideout, like a Calvin Johnson or something like that, I think your 3rd, 4th, 5th round is probably where you're expected to go. And I mean, he probably would fit in nicely somewhere to a team like that. But yeah, NIL money, again, we'll talk about that more in the offseason. But does somebody swoop in and like, hey, Luther Burden, come play for us, I'll increase your offer, maybe get you another, get into the 2nd round versus a 5th round pick. So this offseason really interesting, but I think, and we're going to end. I'll go ahead and go first, give you time to kind of build some thoughts there. But for our teams and team, this is it. No playoffs, no conference championship. We're going to go to our bowl games and we're going to enjoy it. However, reflecting on the year, 3 things I would say to all fans out there that have endured this season with me. Number 1, I want to accept mediocrity, but looking at where we were when we won 12 games over the last 2 seasons under Jimbo, and we got a potential to win 9 in the first year under Elko, I think we're headed in the right direction. Obviously, we've still got some ground to lay. First-year coordinators, both sides of the ball. I think this is what you were expecting when Elko came in, which was a defense that was pretty good. Obviously kind of fell off towards the end of the year. But again, I think they were on the field far more than they should have been, and the offense just couldn't get anything going. So a lot was expected on them. You got a pick 6, you got a fumble, you got a block punt to keep you in that very high intensity rivalry game. So I'll give my hats off to them. Number 2, Marcel Reed. Again, earlier in the podcast about we had to install a completely different offense halfway. So a full offseason now, knowing that Reed's the guy, Wegman probably leaves. It's going to be interesting to see what Klein does with him, knowing going forward that I'm going to have you for the entire season versus only half the season and trying to switch things, around. Yeah. So, and then lastly, 100%. We have got to hit the portal and wide receivers. I get it. The stats for wide receivers at A&M have not been great. Statistically, historically, whatever you want to say, they have not been great. However, we've got to find some money to throw at some receiver because there was a lot of plays last night that were either coverage sacks or Marcel Reed had to try to force a scramble because nobody was open downfield. I mean, you could see the big shot. Everybody was clamped up.
Yeah.
And we've got to find somebody that can get open. I'm not trying to take a shot at the receiving core we've got right now because there are a lot of good guys and they're very talented. However, we haven't had 1,000-yard receiver in quite some time when it comes to A&M. So we've got to go find somebody that's going to be the guy. I think we let one walk in Evan Stewart, unfortunately, when he decided to go to Oregon, which I can't get mad at him for that because look at what they're doing this year. But we've got to find another guy like an Evan Stewart who can come in and get you 1,000 yards receiving and make plays when we desperately need it.
Yeah. There's a special guest appearance for you. Just out of nowhere. No, I agree with a lot of those talking points. I think a lot of it comes down to maybe it's receiving coaching because I don't know if these guys just don't get it at this level, that's how you get open against this level of defensive backs or this level, because you're not doing your quarterback any favors if it takes you time to get open. And maybe it is the scheme. Maybe it's a bit of the players and their execution. But, yeah, your receivers down the line, I think that's one thing that gets overlooked a lot in offensive schemes is if our receivers don't get open quickly, we can't pass the ball because we're just going to open up to sacks. Or we'll open up to picks because our QB is going to get rushed. So, your receiver confidence and ability plays into offensive scheme as much as anything else. You can't just scheme people open. They have to be able to get open too. So I agree with you there. I'll be interested to see if Texas A&M does anything with that. And yes, I want to see what they look like with a whole offseason of nothing but Marcel Reed. Hey, here's the starter reps. Here's the offense we installed. Here's all the things we talked about in practice and drilled and the things you were able to stay after practice and do. Let's give him the opportunity to be the workhorse he looks like he can be.
We're getting better and we're improving, and it's the first-year head coach, and, we can only go up from here. But I've also got in the first time in 13 years we had a chance to go to Atlanta. Got to find a way to get it done. But I'm going to lean on the side of I'm not trying, but things are very promising in Aggieland right now, and we'll see what happens in the offseason.
I think so. There's no reason to look back down at it. Speaking of things, hopefully to look back on, Florida this year, I think the story is as easy as it comes because you can just look at Florida's history and look at this season, and it's all the same. Florida wins when the QB is different, built different than the rest of the league, and the offense is built different than the rest of the league. They need to get innovative and creative with DJ Lagway. There's full stop. Everything else is built off him. When it was Spurrier and running Werfel and all of his other QBs he had there was no stopping Florida. They were running an innovative offense. The SEC was not going to let this gimmick offense walk in and run the table. Nope, run and shoot runs the table. That's the new style of offense. Only thing that beats it now, back in that time was the West Coast offense first coming out. So they have massive amounts of success being innovative there. Then you get Meyer comes down with the triple option, read option, shovel pass, spread option that people are like, no way. This is a high school offense. Utah, you got lucky that one time. You're not going to do this. You can't do this here. 2 national titles later. And a generational quarterback that had a gimmick to him. But DJ Lagway is still a special quarterback. He reminds me a little bit more of Werfel or Chris Leak, actually, who he kind of reminds me of, like mobility, but he controls it. He doesn't want to run first. It has to be just built around him. You have the players. You have a running back carousel coming back next year. They can take carries off of him that are physical. Get that offensive line right. Get their minds right. If the blocking scheme is there, DJ Lagway will find somebody. Your receivers are also, again, kind of like your situation. Maybe not. We don't have a lot of guys who are like maybe NFL ready today, but Elijah Badger shows a lot of promise. He knows how to get open deep. He knows how to beat top defensive backs in the SEC. Jameer DK is going to move on, I'm pretty sure. But Eugene Wilson can come back next year. Aiden Mizell can come back next year. And these are all super talented, very fast, very athletic, speed kills type guys. If you give this quarterback time, he will put up 30 burgers throughout the season. Defensively, you just have to keep doing what you're doing. I don't know what they shifted, and I have to go back and watch some film because I want to go the offseason talk we have. I want to go over that. But the shift in defensive mentality and performance cannot be understated. It is insane the turnaround they had. And there's a few guys that can come back next year that I really want to see come back. But primarily, if I had my wishes, the first guy I want to see back is Caleb Banks, the big interior lineman we have, number 88. I just think he's fantastic. Most of his sacks came in the second half of the season against teams like LSU, Ole Miss. I just need to see more of that attitude, that physicality, and this team that wants to win, wants to put the flag in Florida State's logo, wants to do the gator chomp in people's faces. That's the team we will need. I am going to do some serious reflection on my comments on Napier and see where I can do better. But I encourage everyone to do the same. Still hold him accountable. This is still the coach that did, above what appears to be all common sense, start Graham Mertz. Now, Graham Mertz has his efficiencies, and I will say that. He is an efficient quarterback. But we have to hold him accountable for that. We have to hold this – now that this coach has success and has seen success, we have to hold him accountable to the next level.
A time where it's crazy to think that Florida fans were chanting "Fire Billy" as he's walking to the locker room, and then he turns it around, and now Florida, if maybe South Carolina might take the bait, but Florida was probably one of the hottest teams at the end of the SEC. You take down LSU, you take down Ole Miss. I mean,
you tell me a team right now that wants to replay Florida, like Miami doesn't. No, yeah, I would say A&M probably doesn't want to come back to that.
I'm going to take our money and run on that one, because we found Florida at a time where they were still trying to figure everything out, and it seems like not long after the A&M game is when they've really started clicking. I mean, obviously, Mertz went down, Lagway becomes the starter, but defensively, they figured out something.
And then Lagway
goes down, and now you're down to our kid from Yale. So,
yeah, I don't think I would have beat Texas. We would have beat Texas anyway, but I think Georgia was on the table for an upset that day.
How that could have shaken up, the college football world if Georgia was down to Florida. So I would say for both of our programs, I know Jerry's not here, so we'll let him defend his team another time. But for both of our programs, the trajectory is going up, which I think is something that we both like. And a comment that I'll make, and I saw it a little bit before the game, before the Lone Star Showdown, not so much afterwards, because you know how that goes. Everybody's getting their shots in. But there was a user on Twitter that was talking about before the A&M Texas game. A&M got a big commitment from a 4-star quarterback that had decommitted from somewhere, another big program. Somebody came on there and commented and said, good for A&M. It's better for the state of Texas, and it's better for all of us whenever both A&M and Texas are playing well and have good programs. And I agree with that. I'm not going to take anything away from Texas. They're a good football team. They smacked us in the mouth. I think Sarkisian is a great coach that anybody would be, thrilled to hire because of what he can do offensively. He did shove Mike Elko in the locker last night as far as scheme goes. Any adjustment Elko made, Sark had an answer for it and schemed it up well. So credit to him, and a big credit to him also, after A&M left, some of the Texas players tried to go tear up the logo in the middle of the field, and Sarkisian was the first one to run out there and get them off the field. So I think that's the kind of guy you want running your program. I think Elko's the kind of guy you want running your program. Napier, not so much Ryan Day, who was standing on the outside going, what's going on over there? Why are people fighting? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Ryan Day is he's in a situation. That Ohio State program is in a situation. Like, losing to Michigan makes the season feel worthless. That has to. Like, you're going to the playoffs, but now, I mean, anyone looks like they can really take you down. Like, they don't look like the team they thought they were. You're emasculated by your 5-loss team. Also, I'll say this. So, to your point about Texas, speaking of Michigan, I think Texas is having that kind of year. Like, Michigan took Michigan how long to build up to a national title? Like, I would say this, it was a 5-year journey, minimum. Like, they were in the dumps for a little while, then they finally saw the light and were like, let's just start taking these baby steps and be okay with not winning it right now to know that we have a guaranteed one. And then, of course, Harbaugh fulfills the dream. I think Texas is just fulfilling the dream right now. Like, Sarkisian has put a roster together that there is no reason for them to not win the national title. They have stiff competition, don't get me wrong, but they should be the favorite going in at this moment. I don't think Oregon deserves the national title I don't think they deserve the crown before it goes. I think they deserve the number 1 ranking, but Texas has been through a bigger meat grinder this year to me. I think of all programs, Jerry's not here to defend it, but LSU, of our three programs we talk about the most, LSU, Florida A&M, LSU's on the quickest path to that right now. But they have to get roster retention. And Kelly, I hate to say this to all the LSU faithful, your offensive scheme's not going to work next year. There's going to be a tougher SEC next year. Now, to be fair, I don't know what their schedule is going to look like, but I think they get Texas. So they most likely get Alabama. I think that's a protected rivalry or something. I don't know how this new SEC. I need to do more research in the new SEC. But you can't waste years on good quarterbacks. And I think he's stuck in a spot where there's just inexcusable losses for LSU this year. There's like a lot of mystery. There's a lot more question marks over them than I think most programs right now because they kind of failed expectations. A&M, I don't know. I need to see. If you guys develop that quarterback, there's no reason. But I think you guys need something else. You need that, like you said, your receivers, I think, have to be the next step. And you have to be ready to replace your running back. So
this year, I mean, we had a four-headed monster when it came down to Daniels, Moss, Owens, and EJ Smith. And we lost essentially two of those guys, which one of them was Moss, your big guy. Owens made an appearance in the game, but even Elko admitted after the game he wasn't ready to take on a huge role. It was more of, we're just going to get you some snaps kind of thing and get you back in the routine of it. But he wasn't ready to take on a big role. But it'll be nice to see those guys come back next year. And, you know, moving forward, we've got the conference championship games to talk about. We still got some more episodes because it's going to be a really, really fun ride to go through this playoff this year and see what happens. But a lot of this, we'll dive into a lot of stuff in the offseason because there's going to be a lot of good conversations had between the three of us in the offseason. But I think for Rivalry Week, we did as much justice as we could. There was way too much that happened for us to go on about every single thing, or we'd be here for a couple hours trying to get this all knocked out.
Colorado, the Heisman race, there's so much going on right now.
Put that on the agenda week in the weeks to come to talk about all that. But I know Jerry had to leave early, so for Jerry and for myself, he's a good church boy. Look at him sitting. We will catch you guys on Thursday for the conference championship previews. So long.